I have in previous episodes spoke of living in the country of Panama. As a young child, I looked south into what is often cited as the most dangerous border in the world, through jungle, a place called the Darien Gap, and on the other side was South America. Through stories, books, I became aware of the greatest survival stories I now know, all in South America. They were among other places, high in the Andes Mountains, in the Amazon Basin, or marooned on islands off the Atlantic and Pacific coast. As I would continue through my early youth, I read a lot with a particular appreciation for the extreme. Somehow, the books in this direction I stumbled upon often had stories of South America. I read about the highest navigable body of water, again, high in the Andes Mountains, on the border of the countries of Peru and Bolivia. Very strange in description to my young eyes and imagination. A place called Lake Titicaca. The local Urals Native Americans made islands out of the straw-like reed. This had been how they made their home for hundreds of years. There were Native Americans of the Amazon in Ecuador who shrunk skulls to doll sizes. Patagonia was another strange remote place in South America. It makes up the southern parts of Argentina and Chile. I read about the giant Magellan sloths there, which became extinct about 10,000 years ago, standing 4 meters or 13 feet tall. The early explorers of Patagonia claimed the people were 15 feet tall, and in this very cold climate, they didn't wear clothes, but instead smeared lard all over their bodies, which supposedly kept them warm. They were tall, but of course not 15 feet, just taller than the early European explorers. I read the accounts and descriptions of the Straits of Magellan, a more protected passage when sailing around South America instead of facing the open seas of Drake's Passage, which are often cited as the roughest seas in the world. This felt like a place a real traveler would go, named after the Portuguese sailor Ferdinand Magellan, who was the first known person to circumnavigate or to sail around the world. He went through the straits that now bear his name in the year 1520. Englishman Sir Francis Drake would explore the straits on his circumnavigation a half a century later. Then again, it would be done by another Englishman, James Cook, 200 years after Drake. The Voyage of the Beagle, in which Charles Darwin did a 5-year effort to survey a great deal of the coast, the South American coast, explored the straits also. As an adult, I visited both Lake Titicaca and Patagonia as a favor to my younger self, who so enthusiastically wondered what such strange places must be like. I stood in the city of Puno, just to the northwest side of very large Titicaca. A very large statue stood next to me and the lake, pointing into it. It was a statue of Manco Capac. In Inca mythology, Manco was born either in or at Lake Titicaca. The gods created a wife for him. Their descendants are then the Incas. I also visited the Reed Islands I had long before read about. Walking on them and visiting the Urals natives was every bit as strange as I imagined. Patagonia was even more prohibitive than my mind believed. I visited the Straits of Magellan 4 times. I stood beside it and could easily picture Magellan, Drake, and the others sailing through. I felt like I was being transported back to the year 1520, or further back to even more mystical times. The setting had been unchanged. The winds were far stronger than I imagined. They would hit 120 miles per hour with regularity. That is because most of that latitude is water, and it is land that slows winds. A mistake nearly cost me my life there. I was visiting a waterfall, and in an effort to get a good view, stepped up to the edge just as a forceful gust of wind hit me. A force which would have knocked me from my feet. As it arrived, I knew its potential, and I quickly dove to my stomach, knowing I had no time to brace my fall with my arms or legs. My ribs and stomach hit hard against the rock below. I then grabbed for my life. Luckily, I was able to wrap my arms around a sturdy rock just beyond my head. Even with my arms wrapped around the rock, it was difficult to prevent myself from being blown into the 150 feet or 50-meter high waterfalls below. When the gust died down, I quickly exited the area. I had bruised my ribs, but considered myself lucky to have lived through it. I also visited a remote penguin colony while there. When I was viewing the penguins, I saw my only rhea. A rhea is a small ostrich-like bird, standing a little over 3 feet or a meter tall. There was a great deal to see in the area. Ushuaia, a part of it, is the most southern city in the world, with breathtaking landscapes around it. I climbed the mountains to the north of the city. I looked to the south, knowing I could take a ferry to Antarctica. I had mentioned in other episodes about my jungle. This was in the country of Panama, across the street from where I lived between the age of 2 and 4. It was mine because no one seemed to care about it. I connected to it and wondered what would be found inside. When I became aware of the lost city of El Dorado, I thought back to my jungle. Europeans embraced the story of this lost city of gold and spent centuries looking for it. I knew this place was thought to be not so far away in my jungle. I was given for my 11th birthday a book of Edgar Allan Poe's poems and short stories. This was written a few months before Poe's delirious ending. He spoke in the poem of a tired old knight, not having found his El Dorado. Poe suffered from bipolarism, depression, alcoholism, and drug addiction. Was the poem autobiographical in that Edgar had lost his will to live and maybe was identifying the importance of a person's search for meaning? As for me, I take such things as El Dorado to be a metaphor for what can be, a metaphor for hidden or non-understood knowledge and wisdom. I feel that it is the real search. Cities of gold might be interesting, but my thought is, what came with the wealth? They figured out how to be wealthy. Did they figure out anything else? After the year 2000, an archaeologist made a find of a wealthy city which had existed in the Amazon. There was evidence that the city existed, but the jungle had consumed all that was created by the civilization. The evidence that was found was that the people who lived there had a profound understanding of how to live where they lived. We have lost all their knowledge. Please subscribe and like, as that is how YouTube decides to send the video to others. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and see you in the next episode.